Hey guys, I'm Jack Murphy here at the Team House, and today I want to tell you about the sponsor for tonight's show, Mars Men. This is a natural testosterone support supplement. I take it, I've been taking it for about the last 5 weeks now, and I'm starting to notice a difference. You take 5 of these pills each day, and each one of these cans lasts you a month. I think you need to use them for a couple months to get the full effect of them, but I'm about 5 weeks in and I'm starting to notice a difference already. Increased energy, better performance in the gym, all of those things. I've, quite frankly, in the past, had a problem with testosterone, as a lot of military veterans do, as a lot of men who are going into their 40s do. And this is actually something that seems to be helping me get my levels back up even higher. So I'd highly recommend checking them out. It has 8 different substances in it that help boost your testosterone count. If you guys will go and check them out, we'd really appreciate it. So would the sponsor. For a limited time, our listeners get 50% off for life, plus free shipping and 3 free gifts at mengotomars.com. That's mengotomars.com for 50% off and 3 free gifts when you check out. After you purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please show support for the show and tell them that the Team House sent you. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is D. Do us a favor and check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/the Team House. You get both Team House episodes and Eyes on Geopolitics episodes completely ad-free. You get them early, too. You can ask us questions. You can also watch the Team House episodes live as we shoot them. So, and you help support the show and support what we're doing here. It's patreon.com/the Team House. Those links are in the description, or if you're listening, it's in the show notes down below. So you can click it real quick and easy. And it helps us keep the lights on. So we appreciate it, and we appreciate you guys listening. Thanks a bunch. All right, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Eyes on Geopolitics. I'm here with Mick Mulroy, Jonathan Hackett, Marc P, and myself, Dimitri Kontakos. We have 2 Marines versus 2 Greeks. The KY jelly is about to be...
what does that mean?
Don't worry about it.
Don't drop the soap. Come on.
Of course, Mick. What is KY jelly? Mick is puritanical values. All right. Anyway, a lot going on. I know, jokes. Hope everyone's having a good day. A lot happening. Week 3 of the war in Iran. Lots happening. We have a couple of MEUs heading that way. Marine Expeditionary Units. It's about 5,000-ish Marines. We also had a lot of bombing on Kharg Island, which is like the central hub of Iranian oil. About 90% of it goes through there, or stops there before it goes to wherever to the endpoints. No real end in sight. It seems like the Israel, and we also have Israel planning on invading Lebanon, southern Lebanon. So a lot is happening right now. Guys, where are you at with this? What are you guys tracking exactly? Mickey, yeah.
Greetings from Montana, where we finally got snow after we got done with all our winter training, right? Then it snowed. So where to start? I would say, ultimately, from my perspective, I support the attacks that depreciated the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program, and the Navy. I think that is where the U.S. should have hung its hat. They should have acknowledged it was a war of choice. I think every attempt to try to claim it was an imminent threat has been proven not to be the case by the intelligence community. ICBM's kind of like a decade away. And then, of course, the issue of that Secretary Rubio brought up about, like, well, Israel's going to attack them, so they were going to attack us, so we had to attack them. I just think that shows a lack of coordination. And I was just reading a Wall Street Journal article this morning that basically said there wasn't an NSC process. Not that the NSC got it wrong, that there really simply wasn't. It was just the key principles without any input from anyone else. And, it's water under the bridge now, but I think it would be a good idea to reinstate the whole concept of the interagency policy deliberations and with significant injects by the intelligence community when it comes to making overall plans. Because again, although I support the strikes, I, it can be the right thing done the wrong way is still the right thing. And I think that's where we're at, is what I'm trying to get at. Now, the question is going to be, so we just thought about the fact that we might need a MEU to take Karg Island? Because there's really no way to explain that any other way, is that we didn't think this through, or that asset would have already been in the region. It wouldn't be getting shifted from what we claim to be a higher priority region in the Indo-Pacific to go to the Middle East. And then we, of course, should get down to why Karg Island is so important, and then I'll kick it to you guys. Karg Island was one of the reasons why Iran submitted in the Iran-Iraq War. Once it started being targeted substantially, they got scared, super scared. 90% of their processing of their oil goes through there. It looks like the idea is we've hit the military targets, so softened it. We could use the MEU, BLT, Battalion Landing Team, to go in there and seize it, and then we put it at risk to the regime. If we were to target the actual energy, there's nothing to bargain with, right? Like, it's all over. So the concept, my understanding from talking to my friends who are, working the issue, is the only way to actually use it as a bargaining chip is to seize and hold it. There's a lot of concerns that come from that. The Marines will be very vulnerable. This is technically boots on the ground, to use an overused phrase. So there's a lot. I'm not saying that this is just a simple decision, but that is the concept behind it, that we seize, hold, and then say, let everything through, or we won't ever give you your the resources you need to fund your own regime. So I'll stop there, but I think that's going to be the biggest discussion as the MEU gets closer and closer to the area of operations.
And if I could kind of zoom in the operational level a little bit on there with Kharg Island, when we think about this island and seizing it, there's a key challenge that is a major planning factor that has to be considered, because this MEU would have to physically pass through the Straits of Hormuz if they want to project close by. And that's a challenge because 750 kilometers separates Kharg Island from the Straits. So they're going to be at risk for 750 kilometers moving around the Straits up to Kharg Island. If the MEU wants to be close enough to the island to take it with a close-in seizure, that means the other alternative is launch air assets carrying troops over into the Straits, into the island, which in my view of it is probably that second option is more likely to happen, where the amphibious readiness group, which is 3 vessels, would probably stage off of Fujairah, and I'll say why Fujairah in a second here, or Muscat. Muscat's 1,000 kilometers away, Fujairah is 750 kilometers away. That gap of kilometers between Fujairah and Muscat is like a kill zone space, a huge amount of space. You don't want to be that far away. You don't want to be in Muscat and have to project Ospreys and other tactical aircraft that far, or from Jordan, from Muaffaq Salti Air Base, or from other air bases. Turkey's not going to be amenable to this. We've already talked about why in the past. We can talk about it again. But you're going to have to rely on Gulf partners or standoff forces to actually fly to the island. That introduces additional risk into the mission profile, because rather than launching an amphibious raid from the ship, you have to launch it in a more traditional troop carrier method, where the troop carrier is exposed the entire time. We've heard Hegseth this week say that the drone capability has been reduced 90-95%. Even if that's true, they started out with 30,000 drones, and I bet they've been producing drones since the war started. So that means even if they reduce it to 5% of the amount of drones, it only takes one drone to strike a U.S. troop carrier to dramatically change the trajectory of this conflict, because U.S. policy is very sensitive to American casualties, as it should be. That's how we are designed, and we care about our troops. And if one troop transport gets down, if one 24 Marines go down in the Persian Gulf because of a Shahed drone, that's just one drone that cost a few $1,000s that could ultimately change a $1 billion 90-degree change in this conflict. The island of Fujairah itself can only hold about $2.5 billion worth of oil. That's the way that the capacity works there. So we'd basically be sacrificing 24 Marines' lives for about $2 billion of oil, which is about the tenth of the amount of oil that normally passes through that strait. was it worth it? And that's going to be the question that's going to be asked as we look at the planning of this.
Very good point.
There's something I think overall on this that I wanted to raise with everyone here is, as we watch, these painful press conferences. I mean, Secretary Hegseth with, his kind of JV football rah-rah speeches, which are kind of getting to be interminable, and I can't even watch them. But then you have General Kane come up, who seems a little more sober and realistic, and I think that's what you should focus on. I almost think we're all not we, but the administration is kind of drunk in military math. And if you go through this, you can make a case that the U.S. is doing very well right now in terms of military objectives. It's not finished. I don't think we've actioned the nuclear program. At least I haven't seen any of that. But when we're talking about attriting the Iranian Navy, the military, I mean, clearly they're killing thousands of Iranian troops and IRGC and others. And so you can make that argument, but I mean, it's almost remarkable because we saw this in Afghanistan with really kind of rosy projections. And what we're missing instead of Hegseth there is, where's Marco Rubio, who is not just the Secretary of State, he's the National Security Advisor. And, we were joking before the show, all the memes of him with all of his various outfits are kind of hysterical. But he has too many jobs. And ultimately, I would be much more comfortable if we had someone actually talking not just on military matters, but on strategy. Because on the political dynamics, on diplomacy and on strategy, I don't know if we're winning. Especially when the Iranians seem to be in it for the long haul. It's an existential, fight for them, and ultimately they're going to try to outlast us, and they'll do so, in two ways. One is, economically, whether it's squeezing the Straits of Hormuz and gas prices going up, or attacks on civilian targets in the Gulf, or God forbid, a pretty significant, strike in which U.S. forces are killed, which would have a huge political effect in the United States, and so. I think, Mick, I had lunch with Dan Shapiro a couple of days ago, former U.S. ambassador to Israel, and I think he had the same job you had at the Pentagon in the last administration. And he's very much like John and maybe not like D, as he's hanging out with AOC in Brooklyn, but it's very much like us in terms of, hey, you can make a case for this, but the administration hasn't. They didn't go to the American people. They didn't go to Congress, and they certainly didn't seem like they planned. And so my question on this entire, affair, it's not an excursion, by the way, which I thought was preposterous what Trump said, but it's, perhaps it's the right thing to do, but we have completely, and I'm sorry to say this, incompetent people, not at the Pentagon, but in kind of the overall civilian leadership, executing this. And that's what gives me a lot of pause. And on that note, it's okay if we criticize this. I mean, you have, Hegseth went out and so did others. And Jake Tapper from CNN just did a brutal takedown of Ari Fleischer, the former Bush press spokesman's, press secretary's kind of comments saying that, it's unpatriotic to criticize this. Well, that's what we're supposed to do. That's what a democracy does. And those of us who are actually, I think, correctly criticizing this, like we have on this show today, do so from a position of knowing what we're talking about, having been in war and seeing the consequences, but also from the right place and like, hey, maybe we should have done this, but the execution of this is all screwed up for so many different reasons. And so just that idea of kind of the reliance on kind of, when I say military math, it sounds really good, but there's so much more to it. What do you guys think of that? Is that a fair criticism of just the focus on how many strikes, how much ordnance we've dropped? Like, where's the grand strategy here? I don't see it.
Well, there's also the risk of relying on these numbers. If we rely on these numbers the way we are and say that this is the measurement of success, we actually dig a hole for ourselves, because the question then becomes, well, how many weapons do we still have? How much supply do we have? How much can Israel still shoot down? And this has become a big controversy in the Israeli press, talking about the amount of interceptors they have. It's kind of a no-no thing to talk about, because the reality is they don't have many. And if we continue measuring and making that the headline, that we've conducted X amount of strikes, our own numbers will begin to look like failures soon if we can't actually continue striking at the rate that we want. It's almost like the Enron collapse when Enron was making its books and they couldn't admit that they actually didn't make that much revenue this month. It's a very similar thing where, well, now that's the number you've said is your success and you can't meet that number anymore. Now what?
Yeah, it's kind of like that famous dialogue between the former U.S. Army colonel and former Vietnamese Army colonel, where the U.S. guy says, we beat you in every battle that we fought. And then the Vietnamese colonel said, that is true and entirely irrelevant, right? So we have to I mean, I do think we should have defined this from a point of view of military objectives, and not an absolute one, right? Because to John's point, we're never going to get complete eradication of their ballistic missile program, for example. But we can say we've brought it down as much as we can. We think it's, any continuation is not worth it. And then we can do a pause, right? We have to wait to see what Iran does, but we could offer a ceasefire essentially and see if they're willing to do so. And if they're not, then they keep attacking us, and we have to make the decision. But we've defined it very amorphously to include regime change, which was, I would have guessed that if there was a normal NSC process, the intelligence community would have said, do not use that as an objective. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. We have no even prospect of putting a large ground force in. And if we don't, not that I would ever advocate for that, but there's a 0% chance of the regime falling because there's no other armed element that could actually facilitate that. Even, the talk of the Kurds, etc., is not even close. So I would have taken that off even a discussion. Obviously,
Trump,
we'd like
by the way,
them to fall.
Mick Trump is the one who actually raised that in a true
Yeah.
social post in the middle of the night, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, he just advocated for regime." That was 3 weeks
Right.
before the war started. And so
Then
there's
you-
stuff like that from the beginning, and I would
Yeah.
agree that would not be something in a regular NSC process in which anyone would have advocated that. But you're almost reactive to that now, and so now we're kind of. And by the way, there's also the blood of Iranians who stayed on the streets on our hands. I mean, I really do believe that, and so that's where we kind of are now. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Finish your
Yeah,
thought.
the last part is, the idea of this unconditional surrender, like it's going to be Japan in, like 1945. I mean, they're not going to do that. They have no reason to. Are they going to surrender to an aircraft? I mean, I just would hope, to your point, Mark, it's American to criticize policy. We on this show criticized the policy that led to the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, and we're going to critique this too, and that's America. And for those that don't like it, maybe they should rethink of what they think of freedom of speech. But I want us to be successful because I'm all about the U.S. being successful in this. I hope they can redefine, or at least they can couch it how they want. Define something that we can actually meet militarily, and then start looking for an off ramp. And then if we get it, we get it. And I think they can claim, they did something that many administrations said they would do, but weren't willing to do so. They did it, and it essentially reduced the capacity of this regime militarily, at least substantially. But we're going to have to redefine it and have to potentially even acknowledge that things like regime change were never really in the cards. So it'll have to be a little bit of humble pie. But I still think there's a way that the United States can define this, that this will be successful ultimately.
John, I want to ask you a quick question about, and this everyone seems to have forgotten the NSS strategy, the national security strategy. So literally there was a document that was put out several months ago, and go back. I would encourage viewers to read this. Dee, maybe you can actually post it, because it literally says, and it's a withering critique from the Trump administration on all the previous administrations. It essentially says, get the fuck out of the Middle East. And I mean, whether it's ground forces, whether it's all the things that we're doing now, it was a blistering criticism. And yet we are there in a capacity far beyond what any other president has done. Mick, you mentioned that. Maybe Trump did do more than anyone thought possible on Iran. Yet we are going specifically against his national security strategy, the strategy of the Pentagon, everything with a pivot to Asia. I mean, John, we just pulled a Mew out of the Pacific. And so I want both of you guys, but maybe John first, just talk about that just first, because there is this incredible dichotomy. I mean, and again, it's the American public has no appetite to, or has no kind of attention span. But I think those of us in the national security space are like, holy shit. Like we've gone, like we're on full nuclear Middle East mode now, when we've just been told for the last year how, all the shit we did in the past for both you guys, we're not doing anymore. And here we are, it's on steroids.
Yeah, actually, when I was working with counter-threat finance people at agency, they would always say, follow the money, see where the dollars are being spent, and that will help you figure out where the kind of center of gravity of of someone's thought process is. And if we look at our own dollars being spent in our own centers of gravity, right, from like a red hat perspective, where has the US spent dollars the most since 1978, let's say, or 1973 perhaps? And on security assistance in particular, the number one recipient of security assistance since 1979 by law is Israel. Number two is Egypt, and number three is Jordan, right? And there are policy reasons for that. Congress sets that spending. So whether the president wants to do something somewhere else, that spending forces them to do something where the dollars are supposed to be spent. And I think that's a very important kind of baseline to start with to understand, why does the Middle East keep pulling us back? It's because policy is designed for that. Dollars are spent there. True, we spent a lot of money in Ukraine. We spent a lot of money in Japan and South Korea, for example. And even in Africa, especially during 2017 through 2021, there was a lot of special operations work in Africa. But the congressional decision is that the U.S. will spend money on Israel, number one, Egypt, and Jordan. And that has to happen and will happen by law. So until that changes, it's very difficult for the president's policy to actually shift somewhere else. And I remember 2013, the pivot to Asia that Secretary Clinton mentioned. Everyone was making the big hoo-ha, like, oh, here we go, we're moving to Asia. Then we get pulled right back to Afghanistan, right back to the Middle East, because that is our statute says we will do that. And we will spend $6 billion a year. And no country is allowed to be given more security assistance than Israel. That's our laws. They say that. This is not a surprise or some political statement. I mean, this is the truth. And I think that's very important for people to understand. Why is there this magnetic pull? It's because our laws say so. And if we don't like that, we need to vote people into office that will do something different. And until we do that, Congress is going to continue making these resolutions that are 100-0 in support of Israeli policies in the Middle East. And that means our dollars are going to be spent that way too. Again, if we don't like it.
Right now.
I know. But hey, even AOC voted for that too. So, I mean, this is a major thing in Congress, that where are the dollars going? Well, they're going there. And that means we're going there. Our troops are going to go there. And if it's very interesting to look at the Pacific angle right now. The U.S. just asked President Trump just asked for China and Japan to send ships to the Middle East to help secure the Straits of Hormuz, which is very fascinating because we just pulled a MEU out of Japan, the 31st MEU, which is designed to protect Japan and the first island chain from a Chinese excursion toward Taiwan. And now we're asking that potential adversary to also send troops with us to the Middle East. I mean, it's just kind of interesting to look at that. But the reason the U.S. is asking that is because the U.S. can only secure 10% of the daily transits through the Strait of Hormuz with our naval assets that we have. That's important to think about because we have half the number of ships now than we had in 1988 when we did Operation Praying Mantis and successfully defended the Kuwaiti vessels that were U.S. flagged. We have half the number of ships now. True, our technologies have improved, but there's not much to do against these mines because we just decommissioned four of our demining vessels no longer exist. So we lost that capability. We have 0% of that capability. We have 2 littoral combat ships that can help with that. They're not designed for that. They're not task organized for that. And those ships have had their own problems coming into production and to use besides the mine laying issues. Those ships are kind of looked at within the Marine Corps and Navy as a little bit of a disaster zone. So those are the things we have to demine. Now we're asking our potential adversary to come help us. And we're asking Japan to basically make itself naked for its Navy against a potential Chinese incursion to come help us with our operation in the straits that Japan probably didn't agree with in the first place.
Yeah, on that point, Jonathan's point, so the Avenger class minesweepers were decommissioned. I think it was like last year, right? The last one?
Yes.
Literally terrible timing. They were designed specifically. They didn't have metal holes. They were silent. They had all this special kind of radar. That's what they did. I mean, that was their sole mission. They gave that mission to as Jonathan said, the littoral combat ships, I think the Independence class. But they do it with drones, right? It's really not the ship itself, at least my understanding. And again, we're Marines, not naval officers. But they basically gave it to a multi-purpose platform. And so the question, and I've talked to people that really know this, they're concerned that they haven't nearly been as tested, obviously, as the ones we decommissioned, and this might not go as smoothly as we had hoped. But it wasn't made. The decision was made before this conflict, so it's not really casting aspersions on anybody. It's just we've got to deal with that. But to your other question, Mark, yes, I mean, as I've mentioned before, I'm more of a Reagan era Republican as far as national security. So this idea that we were going to withdraw from the world, stop being the leader of the free world, focus on homeland security, which is, to be frank, I mean, every country focuses on homeland security. If you want to be that exceptional nation, you got to go beyond that, right? Literally every country focuses on its own security. And now it's proven already in a matter of months to have not been the right decision. And the people who wrote it, including the National Defense Strategy, so specific to the military, are now on Capitol Hill defending the war in Iran.
It's incredible.
And
Rich Colby. I mean,
like 3 weeks later.
yeah, it's incredible.
Right. Right. So and maybe I'm not to put it down all on process, but the process of the NSC is what creates the national security strategy. And then, of course, the component of the NSC that's specific to the defense, civilian and uniformed, creates the defense strategy. It just doesn't seem like there's obviously not a consistency, and it's almost like we tossed the whole thing already, within a month of passing it. So we'll have to see. I'm sure the counter argument be like, no, we got to take care of Iran so that we can then do our strategy. But I think it's pretty clear. And to Jonathan's other point on the fall of money, the Middle East is always going to be important to us. Let's just accept it. Let's just accept that the U.S. taxpayer pays enough to our national security that we should be able to do all the above, right? All the above. We can do it. We can do it diplomatically, intelligence, militarily. We can be the, exceptional country, the indispensable nation around the world. And we should view it that way. Yes, we have priorities like we always have. But this idea that we can only focus on ourselves and dominating the Western Hemisphere is just not does not live up to what the United States, I think, true mission is, which is to essentially be that leader of the free world.
And also with that,
the notion on the MU, just one quick thing for both you guys, and Jonathan, maybe jump in here, because I think that there's a couple of things here. One is, I think, Mick, you mentioned that it certainly appears that it's amazing because the problem set of the Straits of Hormuz should have been first. And I mean, look, the Pentagon, this, you've stared at this freaking problem set for several decades. So the idea that we're unprepared for this is quite extraordinary. Or perhaps there was a recommendation to the civilian leadership that wasn't taken on this. But I find that remarkable, and that we're at a place now where, I don't understand why it's not more of an issue. Where is it getting baked in that there actually might be U.S. ground forces? The MU is going. Is that a feint? Is that a threat to the Iranians, or is it actually, if you look at the Straits of Hormuz, militarily, is this going to be required? Because it's so difficult. So, but here we are. Not only has there been, we've expended a huge amount of money on this. The region's a bit of a mess. We're actually talking about putting U.S. forces on the ground. I mean, again, just if you kind of sit back and think, well, wait a second, during the Trump campaign or the initial stage of the Trump administration, this is actually unfathomable what's occurring right now. I guess maybe the question on that is also a political question too. Is that the American people are they going to be okay with this? And because likely there will be American servicemen and women who die if we go down this road. I cannot imagine. And just you take a look at the air-to-air KC-135 crash. I mean, bad shit happens, or drones hitting our people in Kuwait. Probably there will be casualties if we do this. I mean, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, on the political question, the people have spoken through their representatives and senators whether or not they want to stop this war, and the Congress decided not to make a resolution to stop it. So, I mean, based on our system, that's the output of our system, that those who are elected chose to allow this to continue, which is, whether we agree with it or not, that's how it's designed to work. If it's working properly, of course.
We can all admit it's bullshit. It's okay. We can all
it's
admit
approval. It's approval. That's why we should look at it.
Yeah, but I mean, like, the latest polling is like it's at like hovering around 30% approval for this. It's like the American people do not want this to go on, and they definitely. I'm an American citizen. I don't want fucking boots on the ground. Let's go covert, full force, baby. You know what I mean? Let's do that. Not interested in Marines getting fucking killed on Karg Island or more KC-135 people crash. Like, not interested at all. It's no benefit to us whatsoever as a country. Zero.
Well, I think there's two indicators you can kind of analyze from this with the Marines. So first of all, the fact that the Marines were not positioned there or chopped there, like change of operational control from the Pacific to the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain before the conflict started, kind of indicates that that was not part of the initial planning, first of all. And second of all, moving the Marines from the Seventh Fleet to the Fifth Fleet is a strategic decision, not an operational decision, which signals to me that they will be probably used. This isn't likely a feint, because the amount of things behind the scenes that have to occur for the Marines to move from one to the other and be positioned somewhere else, it's not simply a military objective that's being achieved here. It's also a political and strategic objective that requires a lot of thought and planning to do at the level that needs to move them there. So that kind of signals to me that, yes, they will be used. And looking at Karg Island, I mentioned earlier the distance between the Straits and Kharg Island, but there's another distance that's really important, and that's the distance between Kharg Island and Abadan. Abadan is the primary, like, mainland part of the entire oil production for Iran, and it's not very far away from Kharg Island. And if the government right now, the U.S. government, is looking at an incremental approach to kind of solving this problem that they've created in the Straits, they'll put Marines maybe on Kharg Island and then say, well, it's only 100 kilometers to Abadan. That's not too far. Maybe we take Abadan. Maybe we also take Bushehr, because Bushehr, if you'll remember from the nuclear strikes, is a primary location of Iran's nuclear program where there is currently uranium underground. Well, that's even closer than Abadan. Well, that's another great point to project forces onto the mainland. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because of something we all remember from Afghanistan and Iraq, which is mission creep.
Yeah.
Once you've got the forces there,
right.
Absolutely. Once you've got the forces there, it's only one more step. Well, it's just a little bit. It's almost like a gambling problem or an addiction. You know, well, I'll just have one more cigarette before I quit. You know, and if they're right there in front of you, it's very tempting to use, especially if it gets short-term domestic wins. When we can say, well, we took Kharg easily. Well, we took Maduro easily. Oh, we can do Cuba. You know, like, these things suddenly become easy in your mind psychologically because of successes you just had in somewhere other realm.
Mick, just the thing, I think sometimes, and this is like instinctive, we always want to give, and I say this with respect, you want to give the U.S. military a pass on this, because I think there's a criticism of the civilian leadership. But you can't give the military a pass with the Pentagon if it does look like, as both of you have suggested, that, you know, the MEU was never activated, that the Straits of Hormuz was not considered. You know, there's big fights on social media. You have people like, you know, John Spencer, who can't ever see anything go wrong that any administration or Israel ever does. And he's been howling the last couple of days, saying that, you know, all of us who are saying that there was no planning for the Straits of Hormuz don't know what we're talking about, except we have our own eyes. And you can see. So how did the Pentagon, I mean, we can focus in a little bit on the military too. I know these are your old brothers and sisters, but, you know, how did this happen? Again, or was advice not taken? But you know, you do have to kind of look at the Pentagon planning on this and say, okay, you know, this is a problem set we've stared at forever. What are your thoughts?
So I mean, I don't know, to be frank, to be clear, but it looks like it was decided by a very small handful of people, and again, referencing this Wall Street Journal article, without a lot of input beyond the chairman when it came to the military side, because the military would have taken the guidance and the be prepared for missions and started doing, that's what the chairman's office does, right? The global integrator. They would have started doing things to facilitate not only what they expected the campaign to go, but also the branch plans and contingencies that have to plan for. The idea that the Muse just now, and it's 2 weeks away, right? Something like that.
Yep.
I mean, that just, it's impossible to say that indicates anything other than they didn't plan for this.
Right. I mean,
sorry.
Point.
It just is what it is. Like,
right.
I don't think the chairman could even.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of wild that like it's like they decided to open up a sandwich shop, but instead of a sandwich shop, they're going to fucking war. 5 guys, like, let's just start a business, you guys. It'll be fun. That's insane.
Deep with a former MU commander friend of mine on how this would go, and I'm not going to go through it because I don't want to give any information away. You know, the top lines are this. It's difficult to get there, and Jonathan already hit it. You know, basically you have to traverse 700 kilometers of Iranian coastline to get there, unless you fly. But flying's got its issues. But it's also staying there, right? You know, being able to protect your force when you're there, which is going to just be, you know, bombarded. And then, like, what if it doesn't work? That was the biggest, it was more of a strategic question from my friend that I was talking to, is like, okay, so we're going in with the idea that it's going to put so much pressure that Iran's going to capitulate and open the Straits of Hormuz and sue for peace. What if we get there? The Marines are getting bombarded. They've successfully taken the island. They've done everything militarily successful, as we would expect Marines to do, and Iran just blows them off. You know what I mean? Like they just, nope, we're still going to block the Straits of Hormuz, and we're still going to keep attacking our partners and allies. And
I have a question about
that's a big question.
Yeah.
Hey, let me just jump in right here. I got a bolt, guys.
All right, bye. Thanks, Mark.
I can leave this open or no?
No, you're good.
Okay, sorry, guys.
All right, bye.
Take care, bro.
I have a question about Karg Island, about like, let's say the Marines do take it. Are they assuming that, is there like a thought process that like, you know, we're going to have 2,500 Marines there. It's Iran's like central hub of like distributing oil. They're less likely to attack it because they're going to fucking destroy their entire economy. Is that like a thought process that's going on?
Well, the important thing is that these ballistic missiles have different range capabilities, so they can't use their long-range ballistic missiles to fire on Kharg Island unless they reposition their transporter or erector launchers further away. So this is already a problem that the regime will be thinking through. But that number of Marines you mentioned, 2,200, 2,500, that's not the amount of Marines that will take the island, because the way the Marine Expeditionary Unit is designed is to be an air and ground task force. So there's an air combat element, a ground combat element, and a logistics combat element, plus some other sustainment elements around that. What you'd probably see instead is a battalion landing team, which is 550 roughly people, actually physically seizing, holding, and sustaining on that island, while you'd have other people kind of in these rings of distance around it to protect, sustain, resupply, deploy, redeploy, do reception staging, armor movement, and integration, all these things that go into what's called the rapid planning process or rapid response planning process that the MU uses to plan for exactly this type of contingency. So the MU can do it operationally. Like it's part of their doctrine to do that. That's why the Marine unit's being sent there, because it's literally the only entity in our entire Department of Defense that can do exactly this operation as their primary mission objective, right? The question is, as you asked, is what are they safe after that? What does that mean after that? Well, the regime has like 4,000 mines right now. The transits before the war started were around 140 plus transits per day around the Straits. So if you do the math on that, they can still put the Straits at risk regardless of what we do in Karg Island for a very long time in terms of combat time, right? So even if we did, it takes us 2 weeks to get there, first of all. So there's a lot of things happening in those 2 weeks. Then they actually seize and hold the island, which takes a few days to do. Now we're talking about next month. The regime could then deploy more mines. They're not sophisticated devices. They could deploy more mines. They're magnetic. They don't really require very much to be used, especially with small boats that they have. The other very important thing we haven't mentioned yet is the Houthis have not been active. And so if countries try to move oil somewhere else while the U.S. is trying to do this chess piece movement in the Straits, for example, Fujairah, which I mentioned at the beginning of the show, it's important because there's actually a land-based pipeline across the peninsula that can move a small amount of oil to Fujairah and then send it out. There's another one across Saudi Arabia as well, but that's not quite in the discussion right now. But the Houthis can target that Fujairah port from the south to north, right? So even if we put troops outside Fujairah to protect the MU that's been deployed inside the Gulf, that back element, that rear element, could now be at risk by the Houthis on the other side. So these are like very important things to think about as we're thinking what happens when those Marines actually land on the island. It's not just the island that's now a thing to consider for force protection. It's also the things in the rear area that we consider to be the rear area that the enemy can then open up and harass us in the rear area. I hate to use the Vietnam comparison, but this did happen in Vietnam when we were doing operations into North Vietnam, and then the North Vietnamese activated forces in South Vietnam to bring the fight to us in our rear areas, which threw us off balance numerous times in many of their North Vietnamese successful operations against us. And we had superior forces at that time as well.
Yeah, I think they struck Fujairah yesterday, right? I mean, I saw certainly social media posts that. And then, of course, the Houthis can also put other, the Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb, all other places. This hasn't gotten as bad as it could get.
Exactly.
And we could end up with, although I agree with Jonathan and my friend, the Marines will take the island if tasked. The question is, how do we get them out of it? Now, if everything works fine and it's basically a tick for tack, then I guess that's how we get them out of it. But if they don't concede and they don't really seem to be willing to concede anything. The other point, and I think we've talked about this before, is this whole mosaic defense of Iran, right? They are designed that if they take a significant threat to the regime, which this obviously was, they operate very independently, like 31 different provinces, different commanders, different intelligence collection capability, militias, special type operations. I mean, this is what they are designed to withstand. So I don't necessarily know how we could ever get to a point where they would unconditionally surrender. I think there'll always be somebody that's in the regime, even if we keep decapitation strikes. So we're in a position where, again, why I'm advocating for the U.S. to set our own objectives, to determine when we met it, and then unilaterally do a pause if necessary, and see if it can decompress the whole situation where Iran will follow. But if the whole idea is to put military pressure enough to get the regime to have some kind of signing of surrender, it's putting a task on the military that's ill-defined and really unachievable, right? I mean, if you're going to fight an asymmetric war, you have to be willing to take more pain than the other. And that's what they've clearly decided to do. And they've clearly decided to take as much pain as we can give them.
Yeah, there's another Vietnam era quote that the Americans win, or they lose if they don't win, and the other side wins if they don't lose.
Yeah.
Because it's about attrition. Americans are not designed to support attrition because we have a democratic process that puts pressure every 2 to 4 years on what our war policy is. And if that war lasts longer than 2 to 4 years, you're almost guaranteed a shift in how the war is going to be executed in a way that misaligns with the original objectives of that war.
I want to ask you guys about there was a Bloomberg report about the U.S. Army sending 10,000 interceptor drones developed like in Ukraine to the Middle East to combat Iran's like missile and drones. They're from AI-enabled company Merops, it's called. It cost about $15,000 each. And, I love this idea. Why the fuck didn't we have that like 3 months ago there? Before we start, or 3 weeks ago.
I think that is a bird that actually catches bees in the air or something. I think.
Is that it?
I thought it was like an acronym, but it's not. It's actually named. It's time for the United States to wake up to the realities that we're seeing in Ukraine, right? Low cost, but efficient, lethal options, instead of thinking that everything has to be, I'm probably dating myself here, a Cadillac that we spend an incredible amount of money on, and somehow that gives us the superior advantage in every conflict we fight. It's just simply not the case. And this the assassin's mace concept, that I think everybody uses that term because it sounds cool, that the Chinese have, is basically, find something that's 100% cheaper to kill something that's 100% more expensive. The United States needs to realize that is a concept of warfighting that we need to embrace. I know that there's like a desire to have every, district in the country participate in the building of some massive new weapon system. And I'm not saying that all of those weapon systems are not a good idea, but we have to have a balance. And this has really proven it. This war of attrition is, we're going to run out of interceptor missiles here shortly.
A great comparison is one Shahed costs $30,000 to make, which is one of these one-way attack drones, $30,000. One Tomahawk is $3.6 million per Tomahawk. And orders of magnitude different, and the outcomes can almost be the same, depending on what the target is that you strike with this either device.
Yeah, so my question is, like, why didn't we plan to have like 5,000 of these drones down there dispersed across all of our bases, ready to intercept instead of using Patriots? And, that costs probably, I don't know what a Patriot is. It's a 1.3 mil, I think I read. That is incredible. Yeah, like,
I think that's
forget
right.
the THAADs too. The THAADs are like insanely more expensive. So like, why not have 7,000 drones ready to rock at all our bases dispersed in the region, especially before we're about to, we decapitated a regime that now is completely out of control, right? Like you mentioned, the Mosaic Doctrine. Like, we don't even know who to negotiate with. Like, how long will it take if we did reach a deal with the top brass for like the rest of the 31 provinces to like, oh yeah, okay, we're going to back off now?
It's a good point. I mean, we don't even know this current status of the supreme leader. I mean, I don't think it's a conspiracy theory to say, hey, how come he didn't do a video or speak? Right. And then I've talked to an Iranian who's like, and by the way, the grammar was horrible. And this person's pretty educated. And it didn't, I mean, I didn't read or know this to be true, but I'm pretty sure based on what this person said is like the person A used terrible grammar, B used a lot of more Arabic words than they would have expected, and obviously didn't appear on camera or audio. Like there's something going on there.
Well, he was injured in the initial attack, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But maybe far more injured than we might know. And then the question that I've also heard from people who followed Mostaba's career is he pretty much does what the IRGC tells him to do, is what I would sum up my half an hour conversation. So it's the IRGC that's in charge. And it's an amorphous group. Like, so who are we going to negotiate with? Essentially, is the point of your question, D? And I don't know that we have an answer to that.
I mean, it was pretty clear before these bombings the attack started, and
we basically left the two worst guys alive.
Yeah,
yeah. Who do you think? Laranjani and
Ghalibaf.
That's the speaker, right, of the parliament.
So you've got the speaker of parliament and the Supreme National Security Council leader. But these guys are old IRGC guys from the Iran-Iraq War, and they're the kind of lever pullers that have been the lever pullers for decades. And everybody else that was killed was someone beholden to these two guys. So the fact that these two guys are still alive, it's like we almost got the opposite outcome that we were looking for with the strike deck that we used, which could have been just because we didn't have enough HUMINT on the ground to actually validate the targets at the very opening when we were doing the triggered strikes to actually hit those large-scale first 3 strikes on day one. Because as far as the strikes that I've worked on, if we want to have that one individual in there, we're going to make sure we know who else is in the room with them. Because if there's strategic effects if you kill the wrong people at the wrong time. And it seems that we just drop bombs on large gatherings of folks during Ramadan, which is actually, a strategy that I have used as well, because you get the most bang for your buck when they're all having suhoor dinner together. But if you don't know who's in there, you might end up eliminating the ones that you actually wanted to survive for a specific amount of time to get a specific end state out of after that strike.
So you're saying, John, that don't plan a war on the back of a napkin with 5 guys? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe it was 6 guys might have been.
6 guys, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, they're critical people, but the whole point is they should be informed, right? I mean,
but who's the only one that's actually General Kane?
Right, General Kane, I think, is doing the best he can. But the other guys, say the Secretary of State, they go from talking about domestic policy to, they don't have time to be an expert on all of this stuff.
I totally agree.
I'm not making excuses for them, but
that's why you need a robust NSC. Yeah, that's why you need that robust NSC. You're an executive. You're not in the weeds, but you shouldn't just be again, this isn't starting a business. This is actually going to war that's killed thousands of Iranians. We have 150 plus injured Americans, plus now I think it's over 12 dead. And there's no end in sight. It's these are huge decisions that you're in charge of. Anybody with wrinkles in their brains would understand that I need to get as much information from as many experts as possible before I make a commitment like this that will lead to people dying and, potentially hundreds of billions of dollars. Forget even the oil, in our economy, just the actual money that it costs to sustain operations. And I'm a dummy, and I know that. You would think the people in charge would be yeah, let's get as much information as humanly possible. Get smart guys in the room like Mick and John and Andy and and tell us the truth so we can make an actual decision, not get dog-walked by Israel.
The challenge is when military planners are presenting these options, they're in their advisor capacity, and they're saying, here is the most likely outcome. Here's the most dangerous outcome. Here are some black swan events to look out for. We recommend against the most dangerous option. We recommend against this particular avenue. And then the decision maker will look at that and say, I'm ignoring your advice and I'm taking the most dangerous option. Plus, I'm tacking on these other political outcomes because I want to do that. And that's not against the current administration. That's how every administration works. That's how it works at the embassies when we're at the country team meeting with the ambassador and the senior defense official says, sir, I don't think that this is a good idea to do X. And the ambassador says, thank you for that. I'm doing X. And there isn't much you can do about it, because then they'll come back to you and say, now plan for X, even though you just told them that that was a bad idea and here's all the reasons why. You have to put all those reasons why to the side and use them as contingencies, and then plan for how you're actually going to execute this thing that you just told them was a bad idea.
And in these meetings in the past have been recorded. I mean, not necessarily recorded like verbatim, but there's notes and minutes and what we agreed to and what the Defense Department agreed to. And part of it is to hold us accountable for later. And part of it is just so everybody goes on record,
Yeah.
right? Where did you stand? Did you think it was a good idea? Did you think it was not a good idea? And with the idea that we hope that we get better as we go back and look at the decisions made and say, the Bay of Pigs or what have you. Don't see that happening now. I don't know what the current status at the NSC is, but to have the Secretary of State be both the National Security Advisor and Secretary of State means there's not a National Security Advisor or a Secretary of State. It's got to be. It has always been robust. It was robust the first Trump administration, especially when General McMaster was there. Yeah, I thought he was very present, had a strategy for everything, Army officer, of course, right? I thought he was very good. But he was a good example of like a robust, engaged national security apparatus that the president could, to Jonathan's point, they can rely on or not, but it's there. And chances are they would at least take it into consideration for decisions.
Do you think that there's anything has anything to do with like how well the Venezuela operation went, even though it's like totally night and day? A 2-hour JSOC operation in the dead of night compared to sustained air operations. Like, do you guys think that because that went so well and like as well as it possibly could be, there was one guy who was injured, that added into the calculus of like President Trump and whoever else to be like, yeah, we could totally fucking do this. Like, let's just be fucking easy. We're the United States. Like,
well, President Trump referenced it several times. I think the whole idea that he can find somebody in the regime that he can work with and then put pressure on them to capitulate is what he did in Venezuela. It's just an entirely different country. Again, I think that would have been something that would have been identified in the discussions about this. It would have been like, yeah, you could very well end up with somebody who's more extreme than the actual person that you took out. In that case, the former spring leader. And it looks like that's what happened. And that's what, from what I've seen from open reporting, that's what the IC said was going to happen. Not to, tout something that's not in our own interest, but it seems like that's what they said was going to happen, and that's what is happening. And it's unlikely to change. So we have to deal with the current situation, not the one we want or the one we try to present, but the one that's actually is.
Yeah, and if you guys were listening, we did say that too before this popped off as well. John did. So if you want,
you guys should be making some money on Polymarket with all my predictions.
Yeah, for real. I know. With all he called who the new boss was going to be, he called everything. John's secretly very wealthy from all his predictions.
You can bet on all this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's actually the CFTC just put out new guidance on how or how not to bet on events like assassinations, wars, things like this that are morally questionable. There are some prohibitions, but they're very hard to regulate. These what they're called event contracts, and it just came out like 2 days ago about what you can actually do. The problem is someone from Unit 8200 before the war started made like $500,000 off of what happened. And then some people at the Pentagon, like 3 to 4 people at the Pentagon, also made a bunch of money on the war before it happened. So now this is being considered insider trading, which is a huge problem now because it's not actually regulated as a securities market. So now we need to reinterpret how we understand what securities market means as far as event contract bidding.
Wow, it's just so shocking it's even legal.
Yeah. Anything else, guys, sticking in your craw in terms of have we missed anything?
Yeah, I'll mention one thing that I think should always be mentioned during this war, and that's the Iranian people, because these are ultimately the ones that have to bear the cost of whatever happens. Whether the U.S. succeeds or fails, that's kind of not as important in my mind as what happens to the Iranian people, because they're the ones that they got this war. Many of them support it, but the outcome is important, because I remember in 2003 when we invaded Iraq, Iraqis were on the street cheering the fact that Saddam Hussein was gone. We all remember these videos. But because of decisions that outsiders made about the inside, that cheering turned into gunfire very quickly. And it's very important that we don't lose sight of the fact that the people that we need to win over are the Iranian people. And that can quickly go sour. That's almost 90 million people that right now support us. That could be almost 90 million people that don't support us if we don't smartly execute especially the exit from this conflict, if there is such an exit. And the important thing to note there is in the last couple of days, the regime has been putting out a lot of propaganda out in the media about if you protest, we're going to kill you. And the IRGC intelligence organization, which is actually the premier, it's almost like the CIA inside of Iran because they don't have domestic and foreign separation in their intelligence operations. That's who's actually been putting these messages out. And they've been arresting dozens of people over the last few days and charging them with crimes against the regime, about propagating anti-Islamic, et cetera, however you want to describe it. What basically they're charging them with is trying to go out in the streets and protest. Because we've kept saying that we want to enable these people to go out and do a regime change, but 95% of the internet is cut off. And the regime itself has said the 5% of the internet that's on is only for people who support the regime. So they are themselves saying that 95% of the country doesn't support them. I mean, that's crazy, but they're saying that. And that's really important from an outsider perspective. How do you want to win this conflict? How about you put up a mesh network, low Earth orbit satellites, direct to cell communications so that people can get on their phone and say, hey, meet me at 5 p.m. at the square so we can go protest, right? Or, hey, that barracks was blown up. There are weapons there. We can go take those weapons and start going out in the streets and fighting back. That component is missing. And that component, in my opinion, is necessary if we actually want to keep those people on our side as we exit from this, however we do exit.
Concur. Radio Free Europe. Leader of
Absolutely.
the free world. We still should be
defunded
that. Yeah, exactly. The concept is what I'm hitting at is that we still need to be that shining city on a hill. That I know it sounds a little Pollyannish, but that's the way I view the United States. So, and I think it goes directly to Jonathan's point that we need to be that beacon for them and not just treat them like they're just a pawn in this thing. We support them until we decide that it's easier to deal with and throw them under the bus.
And it seems like that's where a divergence between U.S. and Israeli strategies is happening, because Israel is striking police checkpoints. They're striking very low level tactical, vehicle checkpoint areas where cars have to pass through. And they're doing that because what they're trying to do is remove the place where the actual enforcement actions are happening against the people so that the people can come out and do things. They're using very interesting AI-enabled drone swarms right now with facial recognition to actually identify some of the guys that were killing people in January, the actual person, and then go kill them with a drone. So that's a huge divergence between what we are doing with these standoff munitions from a distance. Israel's actually in there on the ground removing the real problem, which is regime people with guns from the streets.
Right. So they're clearly down the regime
states.
Change route. Yeah.
Exactly.
Dismantle the Islamic Republic. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting times, guys. All right. This was great, as usual. I want everyone to check out the links down in the description. The Whitefish Security Summit is happening in a couple weeks, so check that out. That link is down in the description. John Hackett, of course, his incredible books, Iran's Shadow Weapons and A Theory of Irregular War. What's your other book called?
Theory of Irregular War and Iran's Shadow Weapons.
Yeah, those links are in the description as well. Marc P, of course, down there. And if you want to help support the show, go to patreon.com/theteamhouse. You get both Eyes On and Team House episodes ad-free and early. And, as always, guys, great show.
Hey, great talking to you guys.
Hey everyone, I want to tell you about my new novel, The Most Dangerous Man, out in June. It is a novel about a regimental reconnaissance company soldier who gets kidnapped while he's on a mission to West Africa. And when he wakes up, he finds that he is now being hunted for sport by a group of tech billionaires through the wilds of West Africa. This book is based on stories that I heard over the years about safari guides taking wealthy clients hunting for poachers on game reserves in Africa. I took that and I took a century-old short story, The Most Dangerous Game, and modernized it. And the product is this book, which I think will feel contemporary and resonate with audiences today. Thank you, and please check it out.